So, Anatole Upart is a lecturer in art history at the State University of New York at Binghamton. His research deals with the phenomenon of national churches in early modern Rome, particularly those established to serve the communities attached to the Eastern liturgical traditions, Byzantine Rite, Armenian Rite, and so forth. He is currently working on a book manuscript, Ruthenians in Early Modern Rome, Art and Architecture of a Uniate Community, 1596 to 1750. And his talk is entitled Ruthenian and Armenian National Churches in Early Modern Rome.
Thank you. Thank you for this kind introduction. And I wanted to point out that I teach exclusively at this point architectural history. So I'm going to show you the images of buildings mostly. But before, is it? Yeah. One of the one of the things that I wanted to immediately kind of get out of the way is what I mean when saying national churches. And this actually been a continuous discussion between a variety of my colleagues and was brought up, for example, in Frankfurt. And I realized to what extent I may be positioning myself more closer to Italian historiography of these things rather than Ukrainian current historiography or English language historiography of that concept. So as it was brought up before, what I mean is precisely the natio and the idea of a kind of a corporate identity rather than a modern national identity. And this is, of course, related to sometimes it's not on the radar of our colleagues that have worked so hard to actually re-establish nationally conscious history of their own nation, such as, for example, Ukrainian scholars or my own original country of Belarus, where the historiography has been of the subject has been continuously Russified to the extent of negating some of these finer nuances that exist. And but in our context that I, or in my context that I'm discussing, in early modern Rome, national church is the church that is serving a specific natio. And national churches, of course, as many of you know, so I'm sorry if I'm like spelling out basic knowledge for some of you. National churches existed for the Bergamaschi, for the Bergamo population in Rome, for the Venetians, for the Neapolitans, of course, for a variety of locally Apennine dwellers, but they also existed, of course, for Greeks, Armenians, and so forth. The most unique situation of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth is that this is the only European state that contains several nationes within it. And so a Polish national church of Santo Stanislao dei Polacchi was in existence, and I'm gonna kind of jump into that. And good Cardinal Santorio has already been invoked. But this is something that I wanted to bring up. This is, of course, the Noli's, well, the little detail of Noli's map of Rome. It shows you down below the Armenian hospice and the church. And this is, of course, the church of the Ruthenian nation, Santi Sergio Bacco dei Ruteni. And over there with the green arrow, I just pointed Santo Stanislao dei Polacchi just to kind of put it in perspective. Both of those upper churches would be under the royal patronage to some extent, to the extent that both of them are subject to the King of Poland. And But what was interesting, of course, is that after the Leopolis Union in 17th century, theoretically, the Polish oversight might exist over some of the citizens of Poland who are Armenian and who are now united with Rome and who are also visiting the Santa Maria. So this is something that I wanted to bring up from the beginning. As we were discussing with Sergio, I don't believe that we can outright embrace the national identity in its contemporary form as it's being discussed at times, or even ethno-confessional identity is much more complicated. I would bring up the Orechovius's example, like his own self-identity. This is a Polish Ruthenian a humanist, well, if we can call him a humanist. But his point being that when he is asked who he is, he says that gente reutenus natione polonus, right? So he is tribally Ruthenian, but he is nationally Polish. It is further complicated because, for example, when Paduan students are arriving from Poland, they are automatically part of the German nation at some point. So again, these nations are much closer to the kind of a confraternal identities or corporate identities that that we see in Rome in general. So this is something that I wanted to bring up. And this is a closer look. The amazing thing, as it was already brought up by Cesare, about the Armenians in Rome is that they seem to be the most populous of non-Western groups. The largest group of actually non-Italian dwellers in Rome are, as far as I understand, are Spaniards. And the Spanish Rome has been beautifully discussed by Dandele's book, named that way. I think he teaches in San Diego. And I was definitely inspired by that, having met him. So when I chose Ruthenians, it was a strategic point of studying, I would say, the least populous group in Rome on equal footing and kind of applying the same methodology. But what was interesting about the example of Armenians is that it is one of the earliest established churches and hospizi that exist there. The establishment of Santi Sergio Bacco, giving them to Ruthenians by the Barberinis, is also unique because the hope, in my view, is to actually establish something akin to what Armenians already established. And I wanted to also bring up this other issue that about the Inquisition and the profession of faith, is that if you do look closely at almost everyone who is entering Rome and staying in different hospizi, and all of these groups do not require profession of faith. The Polish, the Schiavonic, the Croats, these are known Roman Catholics, so they don't need to be tested in faith. Of course, all the French and Spaniards and all the different forms of Italians are not requiring that profession of faith. The Greeks, interestingly, at that time, this is an older, pre-existing, often Greek community that already exists around Santa Maria and Kosmidin, known as a Greek neighborhood. So to what extent they themselves require as locals profession of faith, to me is unclear. So as Cesare brings up, Armenians are the ones that you need to test, but also Ruthenians in many ways, because the behavior of people overseas is continuously always suspect. And we see it in Ruthenian, in propaganda fide documentations, continuous discussions precisely of the type, well, you beautifully brought up the word, not me, scandal. The Ruthenians are constantly caught causing scandal, such as appearance without clerical habit, involvement with potentially women, borrowing money from the Polish National Church, St. Stanislaw, and never repaying it, showing up, asking for the job, claiming certain clerical state and so forth, professing Catholic faith, being assigned certain duties, given money, and then disappearing into Eastern Europe without any trace. This is so. In many ways, I think I have great respect for the inquisitors because if you know I'm saying it kind of like not as devil's advocate. They're obviously doing the impossible work of trying to contain people for whom profession of faith of any kind is a matter of monetary transaction. And so it is extremely hard to do. Now, we need to be conscious that Cardinal Antonio Marcello Barberini, known for his personal holiness, the brother of the Pope, has personally, out of his own funds, funded 6 Ruthenian seminarians to be in Rome. And there is a continuous discussion. Now, this is 6 students who will be paid for everything to go to Collegio Greco and study. The irony of the whole situation that I found reading these materials written between basically Ukraine and Rome is that there's a constant discussion on the part of Rome. So where are the students? And our dear beloved Ruthenians are countering, well, the Cossack wars are so horrible to our nation that we can never get enough students to come to Rome. And I always thought that this was the biggest BS I've ever heard, because when there is a war, then you have young men trying to get to Rome to actually do it. Armenians are doing it all the time. They're showing up randomly. But for whatever reason, Ruthenian students are never filling up enough, even though it's already paid for. And this is what's amazing to me. So one thing that, as you brought up in your question before, about absence of women. One thing we know about Rome is that this is an extremely lopsided demographically population that has been known in early modern period to have unusually large majority of males over the females, which never happens in any other society, but or any other Italian town. But in Rome, it is present. What is also apparent is that in my conversations with, for example, Father Pidruchny, when I said the word community, he countered me saying, no, this is not a community. This is just a bunch of seminarians, which, again, negates a communal aspect in a very biblical way, like, well, if there are 3 of you, there's the church. But like there is a community in some way. But it is interesting that as a modern historian, like post-Second World War historian, Pidruchny views, even though as a professed Basilian, he views existence of a community dependent on actually presence of lay people and commoners. It seems like when we discuss, like he just pointed out, like we have community of Ukrainians in Rome. That's the community now, right? But early modern period is in 1640, when they set up the church, he claims that this is not a community. I respect the claim. However, I will push it further, is that this is a very interestingly gendered group of people that tied prosopography very much to a very particular typology of students that are making out to study in Roman colleges. Greek community, in that sense, is centered around the Collegio Greco. The Melkites that exist there, right? The Maronite community these are very much not community of lay people, even though they are present, but they are really ecclesiastical communities bound by very often their original familial background from which they're coming, and also, of course, the identities that are created within colleges. And we see it, I hate to say the word frat boys, but these are very much a bunch of young males that are found together in one place. So when Barberinis give the church of Santi Sergio Bacca to the Ruthenians, and this is, of course, the appearance of that church. It's standing next to the large Madonna dei Monti church that has its own wonderful history. I'm not going to go into the appearance of this church because of the found icon and eventual finding of a miraculous icon within the Ruthenian church. This is like an endless conversation. But you can see that it is a rather ubiquitous looking little parish church in comparison to some other spaces. I think Armenians have it, they have a whole ancient Roman temple to deal with. This is actually sitting on top of an upper middle class, if not outright noble Roman house. But it is in the basement and not necessarily very much seen. What?
No, it's still the church. It's still there.
Yeah. The supermarket is further down. Don't go there. No, it's but that supermercato is weird. But the whole neighborhood is weird. But good drinks though. But the interesting thing about this, and while it never achieves the status that Armenian hospice achieves. And the fact that it never the Ruthenian college envisioned by the Barberini papacy never truly is realized. And sadly, to be honest, because there's so much money that was poured into the whole thing. But the importance of this project it can also be tied to the fact that in the living will of Cardinal Marcello Barberini, he specifies that after his death, that money should be given out of his purse to finish the restoration of the Ruthenian church, to beautify it fully, including the facade. And later on, the Propaganda Fide that oversees all of these type of structures, the non-Latin Rite structures, eventually has an argument between the Ruthenian Basilians and Valerio Poggi, who is a Theatine professed brother, who was Cardinal Barberini's right-hand man when it comes to basically a type of architectural work that you do when you don't need a big name doing things. And I suspect that he's been involved in way more architectural projects that we give him credit for. For example, the Palazzo Barberini, he was one of the construction managers and dealt with Bernini, Borromini, and others, and had an actual room set up for him in the Barberini Palace. So talking about the Theatines being super awesome in every way. But the Ruthenians at some point ask for more money, and Valerio Poggi is brought in front of the cardinals to argue that he has done everything the late cardinal asked him to beautify the rest of the church, inside and outside. And if the Ruthenians want more money, it has nothing to do with beautification of the church. So, and this is something that I kind of wanted to maybe segue into the other projects that are happening, is that, again, in many ways, we tend to view these buildings when we see this engravings and so forth. We see their importance for the communities. What we also start to notice in all of these engravings is that most of those buildings need continuous repairs, and almost every representation of these Roman structures are really buildings in disrepair. And while we can say that there is a kind of this romanticism, this Ruinentheorie preoccupation on the part of people like Veronese, but I do think that that we're dealing with the situation in general. And Propaganda Fide archives remind us that of the continuous flow of money and lack of oversight and situations where at some point a Ruthenian priest at San Sincere Baca accused of disappearing and selling off half the library and the possessions of the church and being gone to Ukraine. And nobody knows, but he also borrowed some money, of course, from the Polish. Again, I'm not kind of trying to present Ruthenian priests as untrustworthy and corrupt, but this is again, this is something to keep in mind when it comes to these type of situations. And this is, of course, what it looks like right now. To segue all the way to the end of it, I would say that almost everyone who's been involved on the Roman side of things Polish, things Ruthenian, and things Armenian, had once they came back to Italy and arose in a position of power, had continued to apply their know-how of dealing with these communities and actually continue to sponsor or patronize these communities back in Italy. And that goes into the Neapolitan situation that's happening and the connection of Naples with Leopolis, with Lviv, and the idea that ultimately, I thought one of the most fascinating ones, the idea that a union could be achieved by uniting with the specific metropolitans, specific ecclesiastical provinces, as they convert en masse, and something that was brought up before, instead of actually splitting them up. And the idea that the college for the Ruthenians and Armenians is not a crazy idea, but it could actually be implemented and function for some time and produce good results. But this is very strangely cosmopolitan view could only be achieved in the heads of people in Rome and not in the heads of the local communities, I would say. And on that, I'll stop. Oh yeah, where is it? Oh.
Thank you so much. What rich, interesting papers. And I hope you all had a chance to read them as well, because there's so much more in the written texts. I guess thinking about this panel in the context of what we've heard today, what strikes me is that in the morning, we were wondering about how to find evidence of sort of confessionalization or not on the ground among ordinary people. And both of these papers, I think, really take us below the level of decrees and intentions and find the places where those decrees and intentions hit up against real people and real people's lives and corruption and tempos and all sorts of things, women. Right. So I guess that's my sort of unifying thought. And then I had some thoughts for each of the paper givers. I'm going to be kind of brief and just raise some points that I found particularly interesting, some of which also connect to themes this morning. In Iryna's paper, she does something really wonderful, which is, I think we tend to think of time as something that is really completely immaterial. And yet in this situation, time takes on entirely material meanings, like Are you hungry? Are you smelling somebody else's meat cooking while you're fasting? Are the bells clanging for somebody else's holiday while you're trying to get along with your business? The entire sensorium of this gap in the calendar seems to me to open up through your treatment in a wonderful way. I think David Frick does some of that in his study of Vilna, but you've got sources that get you into a whole different level there. The examples of servants of one faith living in the household of another, of course, connect to Ani's paper earlier, and gives us other ways to think about that experience, which is so hard to get at, the experience of servants, especially invisible servants of another faith. And just thinking about calendars and fasting practices seems to me really productive. I guess the one other thing that I just loved in your paper, and I think both of you mentioned this, was the competitive fasting, where the strict Orthodox or Ruthenian fasting just put the Catholic fasting to shame, the Roman fasting. And it also gives us a way to think about today, right? Where diet can be an aggressive assertion of who you are. I'm sorry, I can't eat that, you know.
There's a term for this called virtue signaling.
Exactly. I have that written down here. So thank you for all the possibilities that this, one other thing. I'm really sorry Helmut had to leave because, of course, he is the great expert on time and on waiting. And waiting is key to so many of the papers today, to Cesare's with the Trojan horse and Ani, where you kind of slip something in and wait for it to develop. And for your figures who keep kicking the can down the road, yes, we have a major problem here, but let's just wait. So waiting as a tactic, waiting as a kind of phenomenon with its own ramifications and meanings seems to me to something to think about, and particularly so with your focus on time. So now I'm having trouble keeping track of all my papers. Oh, this one's you. So in Anatole's case, the paper was quite different from the presentation. So I had a number of questions about, you alluded in the paper to visual readings, which you treated us to here. So one of my questions was going to be, can you give us some visual readings? I feel a little more satisfied, although I'm sure there's lots more that you could do in unpacking those images. For me, what was particularly striking, maybe outside of the question of confessionalization in this paper, was the reception of refugees and immigrants, which, of course, it's hard not to think about our world today. When you see people in early modern Rome opening their doors to refugees and to foreign embassies and to all sorts of people, finding physical spaces for them, putting them up, of course, extracting a confession of faith. It's not, you don't get a free lunch, but you do get lunch and you do get payment. And just thinking about that in a world riven by confessional differences and tensions seemed to me a really productive way of thinking about, again, what this means on the ground. And of course I have, yesterday we had a workshop with Vladimir Hamid Troyansky on refugees in the Ottoman world. And he talks about the creation of the first refugee regime in 1860. I think you can predate that by quite a bit. maybe not a refugee regime, but certainly a reception of refugees and immigrants. One final point that I wanted to raise is getting back to women. So if the Armenian institution is quite large and you have 30 some people, are there women? How are they housed? Are they housed with their husbands? Are they housed in a women's quarter? Are they outsourced somewhere else? And is this a problem that's discussed? So those are my comments. I guess if you want just a quick minute or two to respond, I want to make sure we have time to bring other people in.
Yeah, I would respond very quickly. If you marry to a woman, it's not a problem. It's the problem when a woman appears without her husband, and then it creates an issue. And we see it in Ruthenian hospice because it's so embedded into the church, and it expects that the pastor, who is also a procurator of the whole Greek Catholic Church in Ruthenia, the whole metropolia at Rome, he has to house women. And in 1800s, we have a request to propaganda fide from the pastor explaining that there are two women of noble birth who have arrived in Rome, and they are from Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth, and they are want to stay there. And he includes a floor plan of the hospice to show that they will not be interacting. Supposedly, it is a biggest malarkey I've ever seen. And propaganda fide shuts it down immediately, says no, two women there with 2 or 3 males, unmarried in the same spot? No, under no circumstances. For 2 weeks, really? It's like
Spring break.
yeah, but honestly, like when I saw this situation, I looked at it and I was like, what are you trying to say? You know the rules. You're an older unmarried man and you have some students, boys, and you want to house them with unmarried women. This is insane. In Rome in 1800s, with everyone checking out, what door you're coming out of, and you're even bothering. I'm surprised that they didn't take the guy out completely because it was insane. Anyway, that answer is about women, but you can find in a hospice, in Armenian hospice, big enough rooms. We've seen some floor plans to house married couples, which would not be a scandal. And again, everyone within the community would know that they're married. Are they lying? Yes, of course they are. Is there proof that they were celebrated? They celebrated marriage? Who knows? But anyway, this is a good question in general. Finding women is always hard. I like in a proper thing. I always bring up the Cardinal Ottoboni's example, who may have fathered between 60 to 80 children in 1700s Rome. And unfortunately, he died too young to be elected to papacy. But he obviously cornered the market on most of them.
What did you mean by outsourcing women?
If they're put up in other
Right.
Oh,
houses.
that's
Yeah,
innocent question.
innocent. Yes. Yes.
Sorry.
Did you want to say anything or?
First of all, thank you for this wonderful comment. I really appreciate it. The question, I think, the question that is so central to me is, if you look on, we have this very trivial issue of food. Something that is compared with dogmatic questions is somehow really not interesting. And to ask why, how come, what functional meaning does it have that in some time, in some second in particular, so that it can become an issue. And I think that you spoke about this linkage of materiality and temporality, and I see there also this functional moment of bodily practices, especially in the early modern cities, in early modern spaces. Consuming meat, cooking meat, it can be it is something that makes people observable, vigilant, but also something that opens up the space for provocation. And they say that the Reformation in Zurich started with eating of sausages by Zwingli on Friday, and this is an anecdote, but few people know that actually Zurich, that Zwingli wrote a long treatise on eating and food after that, in which he basically explained the fundamental idea of Christian freedom to choose when to eat and what to eat. And we have I have studied a case of the city of Krakow where ecclesiastical trial, where we have ecclesiastic trials where they try to detect Lutherans, and you have these multiple cases where the first sentence is that he, citizen of Krakow, ate meat on Friday, and the second sentence is he has Lutheran books and ideas and is heretics. And this is interesting, yeah, how this something that connected to body, that is material, but also connected to temporality, can be actualized, can work in the situations of when we have religious upheavals.
Thank you. So let's open the conversation.
So I did a couple of questions. Thank you both for your the first question. These are like totally unrelated, but the one question was like, why was Barberini so interested in Ruthenians in particular, or was this part of like a much broader interest of his in any sort of? Was he like? It sounds like he was specifically like interested in Ruthenians.
I'm very partial to Barberinis. I think they're the best that have ever existed. Yeah, you know, it's kind of like going against
like bumblebees at your home.
Let's not go there. Yeah, I touch the architectural objects of third degree relics, no, Barberini family, as we've known in history, that Barberinis have collected Greek theological knowledge. What we may have not fully realized is that they've actually not just been interested in Greek theological and church tradition, but they were actually interested in general global Christian tradition of the East. And as you know, the Ostrog Bible, one of the first printed ones, was sent to the Barberini family and was in their possession. The one in Vatican is from that period. So their knowledge of what is actually happening in Western Ukraine specifically is insanely informed. Second is that, well, that brings me to that other question about priorities. The Barberinis initiated a comparative analysis of the missals in Greek, in Ruthenian, the Church Slavonic, and in Latin. So, and that was the priority number one after the Union, is that while the Union of Brest was signed, there has never been a comparative textual analysis to verify to what extent Church Slavonic liturgy is pure, or as pure as it claims to be, and completely identically to the Greek one. Or maybe it contains some deeper things that had not been realized. That project took forever because of the know-how, the necessary erudition that needed to be there. To be honest, I would say that there are not enough Ruthenians in Rome at the time to equal the erudition of the Italian scholars. So it's just not, they're not properly educated enough in a kind of a humanistic approach. Let's not forget that Pope Urban, as Matteo, was a wonderful poet himself. And one of the projects that after the death, his brother, Antonio Marcello Sr., as he's called, Antonio Marcello Barberini, one of the money he gives is actually for Triumphus Crucis by Savonarola to be reprinted. And so he is a big fan of actual purity and discipline. And this is one of the issues that they encountered with Ruthenians. While Rutsky and Poti are very conscious that Ruthenian church needs redisciplining, that there is a lack of monastic discipline in many of the monasteries, and therefore Basilians are formed to kind of reclaim the purity that exists. But overall, they are actually instrumentalizing Roman Church for their own needs. And their needs are to actually build a properly functioning church akin to Rome. Because what they see on the ground is a mess. Why they think it's a mess? Very simply, they have gone to Germany to study, and they have gone to Rome. And then they come back and they see the overall situation on the ground in the metropolis of Kyiv, and they are horrified. And therefore, they also approach the Greeks, and they see that the Greeks are incapable of actually achieving anything at this point. So they go to the Ad Fontes, to the Rome of Barberinis, and they encounter people who love this. The nephew of Pope Urban, Francesco Barberini, who was also overseeing Propaganda Fide, he was also a commendatory abbot of Grottaferrata, who paid for that whole big Bernini iconostasis with the holy icon emphasized, which became basically the first perfect new early modern Greek iconostasis, where the Marian icon is re-emphasized. So it's kind of a combination of high altar, Baroque high altar, and at the same time iconostasis. So to answer your question, it's because these people are living and breathing Eastern Christianity every living moment of their life. And they're absolutely conscious. And that's why Urban VIII, when he hears about the 200 people coming from that galera, from the galley escaping, he wants to see them. Because for him, this is like, that's what I'm building. I'm building this new global Catholicism.
Yeah, I have a question to Anatole as well about the location of Santi Sergio e Bacco. It's, as I remember, it's located in this Segura region, but there's also the street named after Neofiti, and then there is also the house of Catecumeni. I wonder if the whole area is sort of was somehow connected to the proselytizing function of the church at the time.
Yep, you just you took all my cards and you gave them away. But look, by the way, my text is there for you to see. Is it a perfect text? No, it's not. I take my kind of lecturing approach where we read the text, if we read it, but I will present certain aspects that may not be in the text and maybe contextualizing that text. So yes, Barberinis do fund the transfer of the college for the neo-catechumens to that area, and they create a whole new building for it. Previously, it's, I think, located elsewhere. I don't remember the location of it. I've noticed also presence of the Albanian Hospicio in the area. So that's another aspect of kind of like triangulating the location of these things. Also, in his communications prior to 1639, when the church is given to Ruthenians, Cardinal Antonio Marcello writes back and forth with Ukrainians, with Ruthenians, giving them different options for churches every time the Pope approves the transfer of a church to them. Local Italian confraternity or whatever group is holding refuses to abide. And that also opens up separate conversation. I actually had a conversation with our Frankfurt guys to what extent there is a unified, strict regime in Rome versus a very much listening church using the 20th century. For example, in Trastevere, a church is given the Santi Quattro Coronati, I think, is the one given from one confraternity of Gonfalonieri to the Ruthenians, and the confraternity refuses to give it back to Ruthenians, and that's it. It stops. The Cardinal Barberini writes saying they refuse to do it. Therefore, we give you two other options for which I will pay to be remodeled. So one of the things that's given to them in San Giorgio in Belava, which is an amazing ancient basilica. And for whatever reason, it's never taken over by Ruthenians. Guess what? Barberini still pays for the renovation. And then eventually Santi Sergio Bacca. My approach to think about it is that when I listed all these churches given to Ruthenians, what I noticed is that all of them come from pre-schism saints with relics. So you want to worship the 40 martyrs of Sebaste? There you go. You want to worship St. George? There you go. You want to worship St. Sergius and Bacchus? There you go. But every church is actually, they already exist in the calendars. But that's the point. Like the calendar reform is the last one to do after the missals are fully equitable and they could be printed. That was the next thing. The printing of the missals was the issue that went all the way into the 1700s because of these conversations between Propaganda Fide that realizes that we need Venetian fonts. The types need to be shipped. They haven't arrived. It's been 6 months now. It's like continuously, and it goes all the way into 1700s when the discussion is the Ruthenians send beautiful handwritten examples of what, and we have it in Propaganda Fide, of what the missals should look like the type that the font that should be created. Really, really fascinating thing, but it's much more pluralistic, these discussions, than like, okay, Pope said this, do it. And it is definitely related to that push within the family. So as soon as the Barberinis go away, which was one of the longest papacies in historical time at that time, once these major players disappear, it takes several generations to restart anything as serious as it. By that time, the Muscovites completely destroy the momentum, and it will never be the same. Like that's like the moment in time and space where things actually looked amazingly prosperous. And on the other note, the way they celebrated the Church Slavonic Byzantine Rite was exactly how the Armenians were doing. They took the curtains, and that allowed for not to have an iconostasis sense of German. You can just put it to the side, have the mass. During the weekdays, they supplemented their income by offering Latin treatments of mass. And on Sundays, they did the Church Slavonic Greek rite. And that's why the Armenian bishop may have felt perfectly fine there, because he just like, did the liturgy and open it up, everything looks.
Yes.
I have a curiosity for you mentioned this table proposed by Santoro, by Cardinal Santoro, so to prepare an astronomical table with the correspondence between Ruthenian, Slavic, let's say, feasts and Gregorian calendar. And you said that it's still to be found, this original table, which was later printed in the half of the 17th century, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I'm interested in that because I studied the Greek and Armenian translation of the Gregorian calendar form, so the pamphlet which was published at the time, which is it's really interesting. And they Cardinal Santoro promoted the addition with respect to the original Latin text of some astronomical tables in order to allow the Greek version, or the Armenian version, faithful to adjust, so to find when to celebrate holidays and saints, memories, and festivities according to the new Gregorian calendar. So I was wondering whether, well, if this Ruthenian table was to be found, who was in charge of this translation and publication? Because for the Greek and Armenian cases, it was the same family.
Oh, really?
They were under the patronage of Cardinal Santoro, and so the Greek printer and translator was the father-in-law of the Armenian
really?
printer. Yeah.
Do you have the name? Do you have the name?
Yeah, he was Giovanni Battista Gabbia, or Gabbio. He was the father of Aurelia Gabbia, who was the wife of Sultan Chateauguay, so the son of Abgar. Yeah.
Oh, that's
So I'm working on this family for my book. And so I was wondering, since there's also, Santoro promoted also a Syriac translation, which was never published, or at least there's just a manuscript, perhaps it's not clear. I don't know about the Ruthenian side of the story, but I'm interested in it.
Oh, that's so interesting. I will trace it. So first to the copies, right? So they were requested and printed in February 96. So there are copies. I found in Vatican not the original copies, but the ones from 1664. So there are later copies, even though this booklet was never used.
There's no mention of the translator.
And I didn't pay attention.
Yeah.
I will look it up at home and I will let you know. I can imagine what I remember exactly, that it was printed in Rome, was prepared and printed in Rome. So it must be that context as well. I cannot imagine it to be the other way, but I will look it up and let you know. That's great. Thank you.
Well, I think we're over time, so we'll need to call it into this panel, but thank you so much for that.